Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today we have the definitive in-depth review of the Kizer Intrepid. Let's get some of these opened up for you so you can take a look. This, of course, is a Ray Laconico design. He's done a few knives for Kizer. I want to say, now, if I'm wrong on this, someone correct me down in the comments, but I want to say the Kizer Cane, the Intrepid, and the Gemini are all Ray Laconico designs, and they've all been fairly popular. I suspect that this one and the Gemini are sort of the two most popular, and one of the reasons I suspect that is because you don't normally release a limited edition in a model that's not pretty popular already. So we have three different versions here of the Intrepid. We have the Vanguard series, we have the Mini in the limited run M390 blade steel on this guy, and we have the standard Bladesmith Gemini. Intrepid. So pretty good design overall. I think, you know, in terms of just a balanced, user-friendly knife, this is pretty well right where you want it to be. Construction is good, size and weight is good, and I can definitely see why this has been a very popular model for Kizer. So let's kind of run through the specs right off the bat, and then we'll start talking about the various features and what's good and bad about these guys. And actually, there's very little that I'm going to say is bad. Let's start off with the smallest first. So this, of course, is the Kizer Mini. It is an M390. The overall length on this guy is a fairly small, and really small for me and my preferences, 6 3/4 inches. Blade length is 3 inches, and the handle is just a little over 3 3/4. All right, no surprise that this is fairly lightweight. It's quite small, so 3.56 ounces. Which is not amazing. I mean, there are lots of 8 1/4 inch knives that get under 4 ounces, but of course this is solid titanium. And by the way, I'll just show you in there, it's not milled out at all. I don't know of too many Kizers that are. So that's the Mini. Of course, this is a much smaller knife than I prefer, and so it probably won't stick around in the collection for long, but it works really well to kind of go in with this video. Now we have the Vanguard series, and this guy is 8 1/4 inches overall, which is a great size for EDC. You know, really, you know, a good balance between, you know, being small enough and easy enough to carry, not overly big and heavy and bulky, but also the blade at 3 1/2 inches is long enough to get most anything done that you want to get done with it. And in fact, it's 3 5/8 inches, so you're getting a little extra blade there. 4 5/8 on the handle, and this guy, of course, is a little heavier at 5.15 ounces. So 5.15 ounces on it. And I will show you here. Let's see. There you go. This knife is milled out a little to save some weight on that guy. Finally, the Bladesmith series. I think this one initially came out only in the Bladesmith, and it was not until later that they started doing the Vanguard knives. So this guy, again, 8 1/4 inches overall, 3 5/8 inch blade, 4 5/8 inch handle. All right. Now, of course, there's a bit more weight here. So this guy comes in at 5.58 ounces. And so that's a little hefty. And once again, I'll show you in there, there is no internal milling to lighten up the knife. All right, and actually, you know, it'd be interesting to see what would happen if they did put some internal milling here. I think they would lighten it up quite a bit and actually make it just a little bit handier, a little more comfortable to carry around. All right, so let's go ahead now and talk about the blades. And I've got to say, I do really, really like this blade shape. So we'll start out with the little guy here, 3 inches of M390 steel. M390 is an excellent, excellent blade steel, extremely high performance in every area. Edge retention, corrosion resistance, toughness, durability, just a fantastic steel. You can see the name of the knife there, Intrepid. And if you turn the blade to the back, hold on, come on, focus, you can see Ray Laconico's name there on the back. Let's take a look at the Vanguard series blade. This is VG10 blade steel, clip point, hollow grind, satin finish. Again, you can see Intrepid in a slightly different spot, and again, you can see Ray Laconico there on the back. And finally, the Bladesmith S35 VN stonewash finish, same clip point and hollow grind, same name on the back. And hold on, there we go. You can see Intrepid there on the side as well. So what do I think about these blades, guys? I think they're excellent. Okay, they're nicely balanced. They're large enough that 3 5/8, there's a lot of work you can get done with a blade of this size. Let me see if I can change the lighting a little bit here. There we go. They're thin behind the edge, so they slice really, really well. And the blade stock is not crazy thick. So we've talked about this before, where sometimes a hollow grind is so abrupt, okay, so it's so wide that they end up not working all that well as a slicer. These slice really, really well. You know, if you're cutting up apples or cutting cheese or whatever else, yeah, you're going to have no issues whatsoever. Very, very utility blade. Now, of course, if I'm ranking these steels, definitely the M390 is going to be the best. However, this knife, you know, to no one's surprise who's seen more than one of my videos, is much too small for me. I really find a 3-inch blade does limit the usefulness of a knife. And so although I prefer the M390 in terms of blade steel and performance out of the blade steel, I'm going to, in this case, prefer this blade on the Bladesmith series in S35VN. S35VN, a great, great steel. Similar performance to lots of higher end steels. You know, it compares well to any of the, you know, CTSX HP or S30V or any of those sort of middle of the road steels. The difference being that it tends to take an edge a little easier and a little nicer to work with in terms of, you know, if you're a manufacturer making knives, S35VN is a little nicer to work with. Finally, we have VG10, and VG10 is not bad steel. It can be a little rolly. I don't find, you know, I don't know. In some ways, I think it has a better reputation than it deserves. I would compare it to, you know, 14C28N, 154CM, VG10 is close to those, although I would prefer either one of those steels over VG10 by a small margin, okay? It's still a good steel. All right, so those are the steels. Now the blade shape, we've already talked about it being extremely useful. One thing I will talk about, since I normally make a point of this, is, and I know this is kind of an ergonomic point, but I love the little cutout here for the thumb. Really, really gets really comfortable for getting some work done and getting some fine control on that blade. So I've got to say, I think that is a total win. So anything else to say about the blades? I think that pretty well covers it. They have done a nice job here on the plunge grind. They've come a little bit forward, and yeah, really, really nicely done. And you know, it's a good even grind. All of that stuff, the things that you know look for in a blade in terms of fit and finish, are very, very good. And of course, I think I've already said this, but I'm going to emphasize it one more time. These are nice and thin behind the edge with that hollow grind, making them really, really nice cutters. Let's see. Oh. Yeah, well, we'll skip that for now. Lockup and deployment. That's where we want to go next, lockup and deployment. Now, obviously, guys, we have different lock mechanisms here. This is obviously a liner lock, and these two are going to be frame locks. So I'll talk about the frame locks first. They do both have lock bar inserts. Let's see, I'll get them both up here for you. You can see the lock bar insert there. You can see the relief cut over there. Both have nice access to the lock bar, so it can be actuated pretty easily. Obviously, the big one allows, you know, there's just a little more space in here, so your thumb can actuate that a little bit easier. And that's something, you know, if you're always carrying a 3-inch knife around, I'm sure you're used to having sort of smaller, you know, smaller features on the knife. Everything is going to be a little bit smaller on this knife because it's just this knife shrunk down. So yeah, there's a little less space in here, so the lock bar is not quite as easy to actuate. The biggest difference between these two, you know, the detent is set really well. The pivots are both really smooth, but the biggest thing is this knife doesn't flip out with as much sort of oomph behind it because of the fact that you don't have as much material here. So there's much more inertia on this blade, and once you get that moving, it does fly out pretty quickly, and definitely gives you a satisfying thwack when it deploys. There's the lock bar. I mean, the stop pin, you can see it back there. Let me grab this guy and show you. Same location, and the little guy is going to be the same as well. So on these guys, yeah, they're both bearing pivots. They're both very smooth. They're both really well done. Very, very solid lockup. Excellent in terms of comfort and, you know, the kind of knife that you could flip over and over again. Absolutely no issue at all with any of those things. Now, let's switch over and talk about the Vanguard series for a little. It is also a bearing flipper. It also falls pretty nicely. It's not quite as smooth, and I'll try to, let's see. I don't think you're going to be able to hear this, but if you could feel this knife the way I can, there is a little bit more, I don't know, roughness, I guess. That's not exactly what I'm saying. I mean, that's not exactly the right term, roughness, but it's going to have to suffice. These are just, you know, to kind of you say the opposite. These are definitely smoother than the Vanguard series, and that's pretty standard in terms of what experiences I've had. The Vanguard series are, you know, they're always good. I've never had a problem with one not deploying well or anything like that, but they can be just a little bit rougher. Now, let me say this. They tend to be a little more reliable. I've had other sort of budget blades with bearings in it, maybe from CRKT or Kershaw or something like that, and I haven't had quite as good of an experience. So Kizer does get it right in terms of the performance. Okay, they always flip really well. This lock bar, there is a cutout on this side, and it's just a little sharp, but that's really a fairly minor nitpick. It's not so sharp that it's uncomfortable or anything, or that, you know, if you're the type of guy who sits on the couch and flips your knife, you're not going to have any problems with it. It is nice and thick, which again, I do appreciate, and I appreciate that it's the full thickness. They haven't put a relief cut in this. And again, it's knives like this where you've got a pretty thick liner and no relief cut that demonstrate to me that you really don't need that relief cut. You know, would this be a little softer in terms of, you know, how hard you had to push on this with a relief cut? Well, yeah, it probably would. But when I'm depending on this to keep the knife open when I don't want it to close, I don't need it to be that soft. I'd rather have it be a little bit tight to spring over and give me a little more faith in the lock bar. So definitely a fan of how they leave those full width lock bars. All right, so we've talked about lockup and deployment. All of them, again, are good. Now, you need to keep in mind that there are different price points on these, and so I'm going to say, you know, is this good for a $200 knife? Yes, it is. It feels very smooth, very nice. I would compare it easily to any ZT or Benchmade with a bearing or any other, you know, $200 knife. They all tend to do a pretty good job. The only one who really struggles with bearing pivots at $200 is Spyderco, and I'm not sure what's up with that. Anyway, hopefully they get that figured out and we can stop complaining about it at some point in the not too distant future. Anything further to say about the action? I don't think so. The detent is really nice on all of them. And again, I'm using my standard way of considering detent. Is it firm enough that the knife reliably flips? And in fact, it's even a little better than that. Like this detent could probably be a little bit softer and still flip well, but the way it's set now, it does give it a little bit of oomph behind it, which is very, very much appreciated. So moving on now to the handle. And again, we're going to have 3 different handles, all the same shape. That's good and bad. It does cause some problems, okay? This one, I think, was the original design, and it is very, very good. The contoured titanium feels amazing in hand. The blasted finish is nice and grippy. So yeah, absolute win in terms of ergonomics on this guy. No issues whatsoever in any configuration. Okay, I really, really like the grip on this. Now, pretty well, I feel the same about this guy. It's obviously more squared off, so you can feel those corners a little bit more. And the G10 is quite textured, so it's probably a little grippier, but not in a way that's noticeable. It's still very, very comfortable, nice and hand-filling. The choils fit my fingers really, really well. And again, in any grip, this just works. Now, that's true of these two. I think ergonomics on both of them, you know, A+. This guy gives me a little bit of a problem because, number one, that first choil is a little small, and then it's barely a 4-finger knife, okay? And, you know, I don't love that. It's also quite small in its girth all the way around, so because of that, you know, if I try to get a full, really firm grip on it, it doesn't really work that well. Okay, now I know this is not meant to be a defensive blade or anything like that, but the small size on the handle is one of the things that puts me off of small knives. I like slightly more hand-filling handles than what this guy has. How about construction? Well, you know, we have back standoff construction on this guy, and then on these two, we have backspacer construction. Okay, that is adding a little bit of weight. It's a nice touch to have that blue anodization. I'm not crazy about the blue hardware on here with the slightly different color of blue. I guess if you're gonna do that, blue is a good choice to make in terms of, you know, colors to go with, but I definitely prefer just the silver hardware on here, and I also prefer the pillar construction just in general. It makes the knife a little easier to clean out and maintain. Here, of course, we have liner lock and backspacer rather than frame lock with a backspacer. Again, very well built, nice thick components, good fit and finish. Really a confidence inspiring handle here. You know, I feel definitely good about carrying it, using it. The same is true of this one. You know, in terms of how it's built, I really don't have any complaints. It is Torx construction, and one of the things I would be a little careful of if you're buying a Kizer, the steel can be a little soft, which is not cool. Make sure, you know, you're using good quality Torx bits that are going to fit really, really firmly into those screws, and just take it easy as you're taking them apart. You know, if you need to heat it up or whatever to deal with Loctite, you know, take the extra time and do that. Don't try to muscle it, because sometimes the steel, the steel in the screws is a little soft, and you could end up stripping out a screw, which is not fun for anybody. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have to say about the handle. In terms of the actual ergonomics in hand, I absolutely love it. Construction-wise, I have no issues except for the potentially soft screws, which could cause issues. So let's go ahead, now that we've gotten through that, and start doing a few comparisons. Now, I don't have, you know, this is a tough thing to do because we're dealing with some different knives here. So let's sort of start with the Vanguard here and throw in some other budget knives. So there's the steel wheel cut jack. There is the Rat Model 1. Both of these are kind of standard, you know, budget blades for me. Really, really appreciate both of them. And, you know, I'd say the Kizer fits in pretty nicely with these. The VG10 steel, I would definitely want D2 over VG10. I just prefer it better. The ergonomics though on this, I would say actually beats both of these. You know, not by a lot, and both of them are very good, okay? I really like the ergonomics on the Rat 1. Very comfortable in hand, nice positive thumb ramp, no issues with it whatsoever. But just when I grab the two knives, one after the other, this one definitely feels nicer in hand. This one is closer. Again, this one does feel a little nicer in hand than the Rat 1 just because of that nice choil and the option to choke up. Now that is a huge win. I do really, really like that. Now this is a little lighter use. I wouldn't want to trust this for some of the same tasks. I feel like this is a little heavier duty than this guy. The other thing, of course, is you got bearing pivots on here and none on here, which, you know, is not the end of the world. You can see this still flips pretty nicely. Oh, here's a great example. This, of course, is the Real Steel 802 Horus, and I think these guys are probably in a similar price point. Frankly, you know, this is a slightly nicer built knife. It's a little smoother in the pivot, maybe a lot smoother in the pivot. The 14C 28M blade steel I do prefer. Ergonomics though, the Kizer definitely beats this guy. This does have those sort of weird ergos that we talked about in this video. So, well, let's bring in a pair of two since, you know, it's kind of close. Certainly close in size, and since everyone's familiar with a pair of two, that should give you a bit of a clue about size comparison. Let's see, let's grab this guy, the steel wheel cut jack, and bring it back in here and throw in the small. So the cut jack is about as small as I like to go with a knife that I'm going to use and carry. And so you can see that Kizer is much smaller. Okay, so this is a fairly small knife. Cutting edge is actually pretty close to both of these. You guys know the pair of two, you know, it loses some cutting edge because of this. This guy loses some cutting edge because of the choil. So I guess both are because of that front finger choil. So in fact, cutting edge is fairly close on this, but this is a much smaller knife. Both of these are much more comfortable in hand and feel much more useful in day-to-day use. All right, now finally let's bring in the big guy. There's the Bladesmith series titanium frame lock. We'll leave the pair of two for a second just because you can now, whoops, Didn't realize I moved it out of frame, just because you can get a good sense for size comparison there. But let's go ahead with a couple of other titanium frame locks. We've already compared a few others, so I'm not going to bring back all the others, but there is the Zero Tolerance 0055. And again, ZT is a very close competitor to Kizer, and generally speaking, I'm going to prefer ZTs. They really do offer a lot for the money, okay? But both of these guys are, you know, sort of high-end titanium frame locks running, you know, just over $200. What else have we got? Well, here's the WE 604. Again, a made-in-China knife. Now, again, WE is going to be a slight step up. Now, yes, they cost more. I think the average price of a WE knife is going to be about $250 to $300, and they are offering a little more going on. You can see the milling on this. There's a lot of different colored anodizations, all kinds of things like that happening on WE knives that you're not necessarily going to get on a Kizer. But I think at this point, you know, these guys are now pretty close competitors, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Kizer make some changes to address the fact that they're kind of fighting with WE there. One more overseas made high-end titanium frame lock, and that is the Riet Knives Torrent. Great knife, one of my favorite knives just in general. Definitely one of my favorite overseas or China-made knives, and definitely one of my favorite Riet knives. You can definitely feel a significant difference and a higher degree of finish and attention to detail in this knife than this. Although if you absolutely love this knife, this I would say, you know, if you're wanting something similar, this is not a bad option. It's not quite there in terms of fit and finish and overall quality, but it's pretty darn close for most people. Lastly, let's throw in the Hinderer here because we want something made on this side of the ocean. So there's an XM18. You can see very, very close. Oh, well, in fact, they are the same size. I do like the choil. This is the fatty, so it's a little more heavy duty than even your average XM18, which is pretty stinking heavy duty already. But you can see not only the size comparison, but there is, by the way, and there's again a little more quality here, a little more attention to detail maybe. But if you're looking for, again, a pretty high-end, well-functioning knife, but you don't want to get into that $400 price point, then yeah, Kizer Intrepid is definitely a great option. So what are my overall thoughts on this knife, guys? And in all three versions, where did I put the other one? There it is. Let's sort of wrap this up. So overall, I think this is a fantastic design. I think it's very well implemented by Kizer. The quality is definitely there. The materials are right where they need to be. The price point is fine. And if you like this design as I do, I think you'll definitely be very impressed with any one of these knives. Now, for me, the 3-inch is much too small, but I can't really I can't be too critical of it because I honestly don't carry a lot of knives in this size. So maybe if you have all 3-inch knives, you know, the handles are always very slight and not very hand-filling and not confidence inspiring the way this one is. So my biggest complaint about this guy is just that small handle. I find it much too small for, you know, what I want to do with my folders. But I know a lot of you love 3-inch knives. So the quality and the steel and the materials and everything are definitely right where you want them to be. All right. Otherwise, I think this is just a great example of a very high performance knife, especially in the Bladesmith series. The Vanguard series, again, is very well put together. It's comfortable in hand. It's a very tough, confidence-inspiring knife. So I wouldn't hesitate to buy any one of these if you are interested. Hold on, let's get the little one back there. The only one that puts me off, of course, because of the size is this guy. That's all I've got for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we will talk to you soon.